Okay, hi everyone. I'm just settling in to give you a full report of our Equinox countermove, the Operation Golden Return. If you participated in Operation Golden Return last weekend, thank you so much. It really built momentum over the 3-day window. If you held your crystal and you toned through the stargates and you showed up, really, as a living coherence node in the planetary field, I want to give you a detailed report on what we accomplished together, because it was significant, and I'm really excited about what the possibilities are now with this distributed network all working up and operating. So because what happened between, say, I'm going to be talking in New Zealand time, but Saturday and Tuesday, which is today, wasn't just a ceremony. We just together performed a whole planetary grid operation, and the results are worth documenting, because if you understand what we're working with here in the realms of consciousness, you understand that whatever happens in the realms of consciousness then filters down to the physical. So what we do counts, especially now with the war signal coming back at us. So before we get into the energetics, I want to give you some surface level numbers, just so you can get a feeling, because the numbers of people that come in to become a node in the network matter. So the video went live, say, Saturday, early afternoon New Zealand time, just a few hours after the equinox peaks. I think the equinox peaks was Friday, 3:46 a.m. NZ time. Within 24 hours, we had 4,400 views. And within about 48 hours, I think it was around 6,000. We're sitting around 6,000. I think I did put the video on YouTube. It's had a couple of thousand there. Dear brother Jeff Berwick, he was kind enough to share it on X. I think he's had about maybe 12,500 people have seen it. Now, not everyone who's seeing it, of course, is doing the ritual. So maybe we've had around 20,000 people, that it's been reached across, very unsophisticated on my side, but just on YouTube and Facebook and that. So that's to be expected. Not everyone's going to do it, but even at conservative participation rates, let's call it 25 or 30%, we're still talking 5,000 or 6,000 people who have picked up their crystal and toned through the Stargate sequence and anchor the Krystic current, into the planetary grid during, let's be said, one of the most architecturally significant windows of this entire planetary transition. Let me explain why that window matters, right? The equinox window, that's what we were working with. We're working with that equinox energy, right? That balancing energy. I laid out the details of the architecture of the Iran war pretty detailed in my previous video. I talked in depth about the 10th Stargate and the Golden Eagle grid and the Reversal 55 and the Armageddon software, the frequency broadcast of war and pain and suffering and masculine wounding that has hijacked that horizontal ley line of the planet, the Golden Eagle grid. If you haven't watched that video, do consider going back and watching it, because it gives you depth as to what we're doing on that particular Stargate. And it's going to give you a base layer for continuing your journey in consciousness of getting up to speed of what's really going on. As we said, as above, so below. But as in the world of consciousness, frequency, energy, vibration, that's what changes the physical. And that's how we can beat the synthetic matrix, what we're finding right now. Now, all that architecture was up for grabs during the equinox. It's not just an astrological event where day and night reach equal length. What actually happens in the morphogenetic field, it really represents this dimensional threshold. The moment when the membrane between the physical and in the higher dimension reality becomes more permeable in both the physical and the higher dimensions. So what that means is that the solar current flows equally through the entire planetary body, and transmissions move more easily both up and down and across in both directions easily. It's the perfect balance to send a broadcast. So if we go back into another video I made, which was on systems theory and the language of systems theory, the equinox is a natural amplification window. And you can watch that video, it's just the one before the Iran one. And what the planetary field will amplify is whatever's the dominant signal. And so whatever's dominant gets amplified and gets driven more deeply into the physical grids. The synthetic matrix knows that. And it's been exploiting this mechanism for thousands of years, escalating war leading into equinoxes, and this was no different. The weeks of maximum violence and fear leading into this March 21 window. It's a very unmistakable pattern, right? You try to preload the amplifier with the sort of, let's call it reversal signal, and that's what they did. Flood the morphogenetic field with war and maximum reversal current, mass death, like fear and grief and rage, building up to the equinox, so that when the membrane thins, right, their frequency is the one and the dominant signal that gets pressed deeper into the planetary architecture, into the planetary field. And so that's the game plan. What you do is you flood the amplifier before the equinox window arrives, and then you own the window. But what happened, of course, is that we come along with a different plan. We just blindsided them and came in with this incredible coherent signal. So if we put the systems theory hat on again and we take a look at this from an energetic systems viewpoint and a physical systems hat, right, this is really worth understanding clearly, because this is how, in my first video, I talked about how dissipative structures work. And you can go to my blog if you like to read it on systems theory in the Middle East, if you prefer to read. But essentially, living systems maintain their order and coherence not by holding energy, but receiving continuous through flow from beyond themselves. And in how the energetic architecture works on this planet, previously we've had no through flow. Now the vaults are opening and source through flow is flooding in to a synthetic grid, synthetic matrix, which is what we live. Now these vaults are open, we're starting to try to return back to an open system, through flow from source. A closed system is what the synthetic matrix is. The synthetic matrix is a closed system, and it uses a closed system strategy. It generates and creates reversal current from grief and rage and war from the human population. And it feeds off that, what already exists in the system, to amplify it, to sustain the system. It cannot generate new energy. And that's the issue with the synthetic matrix versus the organic, right? Synthetic matrix must create energy inside itself. That's why these boom and bust cycles exist, fear and war and constant war. Right? Now, enter the equation, 5,000 or 6,000, let's say that's the number, coherent humans and their crystals, primed to source, programmed to source, genuinely sovereign, right? Processed and transmitting a Krystic current through vault primed crystals. Now, if you remember the ritual, we primed your crystals with the vaults. That is source current. And then simultaneously, I didn't know this was happening, but source, let's call it the solar logos, came in with a solar coronal mass injection into the equation. I'll come in more about this in a minute. But essentially what we had was an enormous amount of this coherent frequency moving into the grids and started to create this Krystic grid at the precise moment of maximum field receptivity, i.e. the equinox is on and we enter in with that frequency. Now, the Golden Eagle grid, as I mentioned in the Iran video, has been running on this reversal architecture for thousands of years. It received its single largest influx of organic Krystic through flow it's ever received, ever. The last big batch it got was in the root initiation 2 years ago when we reclaimed it. And a lady turned up who had the architectural keys, the backdoor keys to the Stargate itself. So this is amazing from a systems theory perspective, because as you get this new through flow of Krystic current, when a dissipative structure receives a significant influx of new energy at a threshold moment, like the equinox, it doesn't simply absorb that energy and return to its previous state. It can't. It's reorganizing itself. It's reassembling to a new level of complexity and coherence. And so that restoration of through flow elevates rather than repairs. So now we've got a higher baseline to work off, higher frequency set point. The Golden Eagle grid is not just a better version of what it was before, before last Friday. It's reorganized itself now around a higher baseline coherence. And the great news is the floor has been permanently raised. And when we permanently raise a floor, the results start compounding on each other. Each subsequent grid activation that we do, each new vault activation, every new human who embodies their oversoul, right, all builds from a higher starting point than what they had before last Saturday, right? Our planet frequency floor is rising, and this helped rise it up. Now let's drop into what actually happened to the Stargate itself. So because obviously the war's still happening and it's going to continue to happen, okay? What we're doing is a long form game of permanently changing a signal. Bombs are still falling. I mean, the human cost is devastating, and it's really real, right? And so the physical conflict's not resolved. You know, the people of the Middle East and soon all around the world are going to be suffering, right? Because as the economic effects start to roll on with the price of war and then the food issues that are going to come, it's going to be a really tough time. It's going to be the big one that allows us to reset. And this is they can't keep the system going indefinitely because it's a closed loop system. And what's happened is that this closed loop system has had a major shift in the morphogenetic architecture, and this is specifically around the 10th gate on which we're working on. So let's talk about exactly what this means, because it's the deeper layer from which the physical eventuality takes its cues from. The physical realm will start to reorganize itself around the new holding pattern of the Stargate. So I want to take you through what we're reading in the field as the operation built up over time. I'm going to give you a little. We checked in 3 times over the weekend and took a bit of a look at what was progressing. So after about 12 hours, we placed the video. There are about 1,000 views, and let's call it maybe about 500 to 600 genuine participants who were actually doing the ritual. And the councils were reading that the first formation was this coherence membrane across the Golden Eagle grid. We got told, hey, there's a membrane forming. It's not a full restoration. It's not a dominant signal yet, but it's something that had never been present before. A genuine frequency, Krystic frequency layer that was running in the grid alongside the reversal current. It wasn't being drowned out by it like it was before. There was no Krystic signal in the Golden Eagle grid. Right, it was all reversal. Then, this incoming signal, can be jammed or disrupted, so a membrane has to be actively displaced, and that's creating this different category of presence. With a membrane in there, we've crossed from trying to push into the door into the grid into having a foot inside. And then as we went into a day into it, about 24 hours later, maybe 4,000 views, I think 1,1600 probably had activated crystals across multiple continents by then. Then the relationship between the two signals began changing between Stargate 10, right? The reversal current was still present and the war broadcast still running, but the ratios had changed, right? 24 hours earlier, the reversal signal was the dominant signal. And the Krystic signal was tiny, thin. Now there's a genuine contest. 2 sustained signals in that grid of probably a similar strength, and I want to verify when I say similar strength, right? That Stargate has been running a reversal current for thousands of years. It's been under maximum war broadcast and pressure for weeks, and so arriving at a genuine contest just after 24 hours is massively architecturally significant, right? I mean, it doesn't happen via volume, right? We weren't even on volume, we were even because of coherence, which doesn't work in the same way as volume. The false Michael transmission was running through that gate, and then the false Michael transmission started to experience coherence interference. It wasn't overridden, but it started to get disruptive. And then the Armageddon software broadcast was meeting resistance for the first time ever over thousands of years. And if we get to 2 days, 3 days later, I think we're around about 6,000 YouTube views. I ended up putting on Facebook to give it a boost there, not that I'm ever on it. And then dear brother Jeff Berwick, he put it on his X platform and he got about another 12,500. So, while there might be 20,000 views, if we're conservative, let's call it 5,000 or 6,000 rituals around the world. When we got to that level, right, this is no longer a contest. There's an established presence of the signal now through the Golden Eagle grid and into the Stargate. And I think really that that distinction really matters enormously, because, contest means, two signals pushing against each other, neither secure. Established presence means the Krystic current has taken up resonance in the Golden Eagle grid. So well done, everyone. We've done this, our first big, bold step, right, with this distributed network that we've created together. It's not a temporary visitor, right? It's a structural occupant of that land, right? It's the reversal broadcast now has to work around this new signal rather than being the dominant one. The synthetic matrix, can't simply drown out with more volume anymore, because coherence beats volume. And it's worth understanding in particle physics, because it runs counter to how you probably intuitively think about power, right? Because the war broadcast generates enormous amounts of volume of mass death, terror, grief, rage, pain, right? These are all high frequency events, and there's an enormous volume, massive quantity of that reversal current through the morphogenetic field. If we were to measure straight volume, i.e. raw energetic volume, the synthetic matrix's war broadcast would dwarf anything that 5,000 of us can do with crystals, right? Even if we've primed them, programmed them to the volts and ascending flame plasma and source current through. But morphogenic fields don't respond to volume in the same way as, say, I don't have a speaker to show you, but a speaker might respond to amplitude, right? You put amplitude into a speaker, the volume gets noisier. Morphogenic fields respond to coherence. A coherent signal is organized, is internally coherent. It's self-reinforcing. It draws a genuine source connection and propagates through a field architecture that's got this precision and penetration that this incoherent war noise, regardless of its volume, cannot replicate. And so coherence trumps volume, and that was our secret, right? Because coherent signals find organic pathways in the grid and move through them really efficiently. Whereas incoherent reversal currents, they fill the field, but it's like static. It doesn't embed in with the same architectural permanence that coherence does. That's why, 5, 6, 7,000 of us, sovereign human beings, showing up in genuine presence, priming our crystals with the volt 000 and 001. Our solar star got activated through the toning sequences as well. We grounded all that in, right? And we were able to establish a permanent presence in the Golden Eagle grid against a massively noisy, loud volume war broadcast backed by the deaths of thousands. We didn't out-volume them because we didn't need to. We out-cohered them. The coherence was the key. And that brings us up to this really interesting, systems theory principle that makes this irreversible. Because once a coherent signal is established, structural presence in a morphogenetic tensegrity, right? Remember, tensegrity is just simply length tension relationships, right? We're removing this new coherent signal requires way more opposing volume than what they currently have. The synthetic matrix would need to, displace what we've anchored, take it out, and which requires a very different and a very significantly more costly operation than simply running more reversal current through the same war architecture, right? The only way they can come with it now to knock it over, they're going to try to knock it over with an economic collapse, to pump fear into it that way, right? The war can continue, the reversal broadcast can continue, but the Krystic current in the Golden Eagle grid isn't just a newcomer anymore, it's a resident, right? It's anchored. So they don't have that signal of the Armageddon software being pumped into the morphogenetic field anymore, right? It's no longer a signal. Now, a part of the story, what happened in the weekend, I didn't know was going to happen, and that was when we had multiple coronal mass injections from the sun that came out. I wasn't aware this was going on, but it happened, I think, between March 16 and March 18, and they arrived at Earth, as you would imagine, in divine precision, right? This was Source having our backs. So what happened on the day of the equinox, we have a G3 strong geomagnetic storm that continued through to the 22nd of March. So, let's say it another way, basically the sun launched massive plasma ejections plasma flame. 6 days before the equinox, and time to arrive precisely during the equinox. And so that factored in this whole other, let's call it factor into the equation, right? These powerful G3 strong geomagnetic storms, you can look this up yourself. It was going through the earth. Look it up. And then after the 21st and the 22nd, we had G2 rolling through the planet in terms of strength. So what I think's happened is that the sun has launched this plasma ejections, right, 6 days before the equinox, time to arrive at the precise moment of our ceremony window. That has got to be source consciousness working with us. God has our backs, right? Solar plasma is not simply just a physical phenomenon, right? It carries what we might describe as solar logos current. That's the living intelligent frequency from the solar consciousness. That is that aspect of source of solar consciousness that interfaces that sort of solar consciousness, the solar logos, came in and basically sealed that coherence into the grids, right? It hit the planetary field simultaneously as the field was receiving this coherent signal from us, from organized human ceremony. And it doesn't simply amplify what's present, it sealed it, right? So basically, we've got that Krystic current sealed into the golden eagle grid because the solar logos came in through the coronal mass injections and sealed it into physical matter, into these layers of the planetary body at a depth that, any other routine ceremony couldn't reach, right? It just put it in permanently in there, right? That the equinox amplification window alone wouldn't have done. But you combine these three things, equinox, solar logos, 5, 6, 7,000 humans with the crystals primed to volt 0.00001, whoosh, we sealed that in there, right? So the equinox with that thin dimensional membrane, and then we've got this G3 CME coming in, dropped it into the deepest layers of the field. And so we've got these 5,000, 6,000 volt prime crystals anchoring this Krystic signal, and the solar logos plasma sealing the broadcast into the golden eagle grid permanently, right? So that was a very unexpected thing. This was a compounding amplification event, right? And so while these things happen with higher probability near the equinoxes than any other point of the year, it's certainly not something that we've arranged. It's just showed up as what you might call synchronistically, or what might be more accurate as divine precision, right? This is a source level coordination. There's no other honest way to describe it, right? Source got involved and came in and sealed it for us. So what does all that mean now if we drop into the 10th Stargate, right? Because I know that a lot of our operation was to strengthen the security of that. We did, claim that back a couple of years ago with the root initiation and a woman who came out as the key holder, but the war was putting significant pressure on it, right? The 10th Stargate was contested in a transition state, right? The original reclamation 2 years ago, through that root initiation, we managed to break through the 1,000 psychic broadcast lock, right? Coming from different timelines, 1,000 psychics holding the grid on it. On our side now, we've got 5,000 or 6,000 different nodes backing up the signal decentralized, right? It's very potent. They're not going to be able to knock it over. And when we did Egypt and all the clearings there, and we opened Vault 1 on the 12th in December last year, all this contributed to this, Golden Eagle Grid's Krystic broadcast. But the war was generating huge pressure on it. The Krystic signal was thinning. And so that's why I called, everyone, at least on my list, and anyone who was following me on YouTube, hey, let's have a counter play. And it feels good, doesn't it, to have a counter move, because all this stuff's happening to us. Let's do something back. I mean, it feels great to have a comeback, a little bit of pushback on that. We've got this structural presence now. There's this signal on the Golden Eagle Grid. We're no longer trying to compete for dominance. We're occupying that space, right? We're holding its architecture in the grid, independently of whether we are actively in ceremony or not, because the grid is open sourced, because you're connected to the vault. The vaults are open sourced, not closed loop. So the vaults are constantly feeding your crystals and into the Stargate. All right. What we're seeing here is that, the synthetic matrix has still got a lot of resources to it, and it's going to respond. But, the precision of the false Michael transmissions and its ability of the false Michael, false Michael broadcast, it can no longer, mimic the golden seraphim, the golden ray signal enough now. They can't mimic it in the same way. A lot of light workers were getting caught up in the false Michael broadcast, right? You can't convincingly make a counterfeit broadcast when the genuine article was broadcasting alongside it, right? It's easier and easier now for people to spot the genuine signal. So those people on spiritual pathways might start noticing that the frequency they were channeling no longer resonates because there's a clearer signal in town. And the other thing is the Armageddon software is losing its strength through the ley lines, through the horizontal grid of the Golden Eagle. Now, because that Armageddon software is dying, it doesn't mean the war ends tomorrow. But because the lag can be significant. The bombs are going to continue to fall, unfortunately, because there's this enormous geopolitical machine that's grinding in. Right, and the populations and large portions of the population are locked into these eschatological programs of the end of days agenda that happens through all three religions. They've all got their own eschatological kind of end of day story, and I mentioned that on the previous Iran video. But they're going to still pump war consciousness into the collective field, but it's operating at a reduced coherence for the first time since the Golden Eagle grid was hijacked thousands of years ago. We have a direction change. Now, in systems theory, and please, if you haven't watched my video on Middle East and systems theory, which was 2 before this one or something, 3 before this one, in systems theory, direction is everything. A system that's heading towards a new attractor can't be stopped by applying more of the same force that failed to stop it from changing direction, right? The synthetic matrix can escalate war. It can try to pump more reversal current into the grid, and it can attempt all these counter moves at every single level available to it, but it cannot unseal a vault. It can't extinguish a flame spine that's now been reinstated because of the 12-tree grid has got that flame spine reinstated, or it can't do it for an embodied oversoul. It can't undo what the solar logos sealed into the planetary field, right? During that geomagnetic storm, during the flame plasma coming in, while 7,000 of us held the signal. The gate's open and it can't take that back. The floor from which our next mission starts to build from is higher than what we stood a few days ago. And this is the power of, I think, the real breakthrough of this operation, Operation Golden Return, was the distributed network that got established. So let me talk about why this crystal grid that we have programmed around the world is one of the most important aspects of Operation Golden Return, because something was built into this protocol deliberately. And so I want to talk about what we set up together, and I'm going to share with you more part of the next part of the mission. We needed to establish a distributed Krystic intelligence anchor on the grids around the world. And every one of you who completed the ritual and did it how we set it up got your crystal to be vault primed. Vault primed is open source with source. Vault is newly opened in December 12. Vault 00 opened midway through 25. So we've got the Malkuth, which is the holy ground at the bottom of the tree of life, anchored along with the southern cradle, all broadcasting through into your crystal. All of that is open source architecture, flame plasma consciousness. And that is now all around the planet. So if you think of it in tensegrity terms, the planet has received not just a single powerful signal from one ceremony in one location, but thousands of coherent nodes that are distributed, across all the continents, the Americas and Europe and Asia Pacific. Every major ley line, right, of the Golden Eagle grid has received these clusters moving through natural time zones, right? And if you know anything about blockchain technology, you can't switch off a signal when it's distributed. There's no single node to target. And previously we were operating from a single node, where I know there's more groups doing this sort of stuff around the world, but people seem to resonate with what we're doing, and we would get one point of attack. But now with the grid down, there's no one point of attack because all of your crystals are broadcasting the signal. And that's the big advantage we have now. This isn't one ceremony or one ritual or one portal, it's a network. And every crystal sitting on your altar and other people's altars around the world still hold the vault codes. You're a living node in the Krystic flame network. And so the signal is going to start pulsing through the grid, right? So what I think is really cool is the operation didn't close after the 3-day window. It's still running for perpetuity because of the vault is open source. It's flame plasma interfacing and breathing with source. And if you remember, we primed your crystal through the crystal spiral ratios. So the way the frequency moves is interfacing with source. Now, I've been writing for years, about the bifurcation or making videos. This is the separation between the organic and the synthetic trajectories that systems theory predicts when a new attractor becomes dominant enough is going to begin pulling consciousness out of the old pattern. And the old pattern is the reversal, the synthetic. So this Operation Golden Return we've just run, is the completion of that process. We've got a distributed grid down now, but that's only step one because we've got the vaults in France and England to go this year. And beyond that, more that need to open. The synthetic matrix still has a lot of infrastructure that's available to it. So there's still a lot of work ahead, but on Saturday and over the weekend, we accomplished one of the more important parts of the overall picture by creating a genuine Krystic signal distributed, decentralized around the planet. This is strategically really important. It's critical in grid and networking on the planet. The horizontal ley line system has been running this Armageddon software of end of days. There's going to be a war that ends all wars and it's going to create Armageddon, right? But we crossed a threshold this weekend, right? Below this threshold we crossed, reversal current was the dominant signal. Krystic signal was just a newcomer coming in, trying to make its way in. And now above this threshold, the Krystic current has been established and the reversal broadcast is the one meeting resistance. We're above that threshold now. This doesn't mean the work's finished, and as I talked about in the systems video, phase transitions are often turbulent. We're in a phase transition now where over these next 5 years, the old system is going to try to surge again. There's going to be a counter move, most likely an economic collapse, right? And the war, is the catalyst for that. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out it's going to lead to increasing oil prices and food prices, and then people are going to not be able to pay their things, and we're going to have a bank that's going to crash, and they're going to try to push us into a central bank digital currency, right? But you cannot reverse a phase transition that's already crossed its threshold by applying more of the same pressure that failed to stop it from crossing. So the synthetic matrix is going to try to escalate the war. Okay, amplify the fear, and people's pockets and wallets and personal economies does a good job on that. It'll try to flood the Stargate with the war current, but it knows it can't pull it back with the same level anymore. So it can't unseal a vault that's opened. It just can't. It can't extinguish a flame spine that's been reinstated, right? An oversoul that has been coming in, right? And it can't, despite all of its effort and all of its power and all of its sophistication, recreate what we did when 5,000 or 6,000, 7,000 human beings actually showed up on the equinox, came together, backed by, the cosmic consciousness of the solar logos, right, through the solar storm into the golden eagle grid and sealing it. You can't plan for that because you can't algorithmically predict flame, right? We've got the network, right? And what happened really interestingly is that the network that we created has changed the way that Alea and I can work now. And we want to thank you for that. Because while we activated this grid, while your crystals are still live and they're still live and broadcasting, we were able to go after a massive piece of consciousness that was a big part of the synthetic matrix that was probably responsible for 50 to 20% of the synthetic matrix. And without the distributed crystal network, we would never have gone after it. One of the biggest challenges that we've had over these years through the planetary grid is through the work we're doing is load. Alea and I work together, and then the groups that form around with us, who they come together. Essentially, though, we act as a sequencer pair. Well, I kind of command the energy, and it moves through Alea's field as the anchor, and her body becomes the alchemical zone where these massive fields drop into the earth and get metabolized. And that's how we operated, and it worked great for doing personal healings and for smaller planetary work. Smaller grid work, we were able to normally cope, but poor old Alea, oh my goodness, she would be processing so much, and just want to honour her for a moment because she's done more than anyone on the planet for processing some stuff without any recognition. But there's a limit as to what one person can transmute without getting overwhelmed, and some of these fields are just too dense, too architecturally embedded to be metabolized layer by layer through one anchor point, a layer. So what this distributed crystal network has changed fundamentally, which makes me believe we're going to be able to go after more increasingly large pieces, is with thousands of these activated, these volt-coated crystals that are distributed across the grid, and the load of this massive dissolution can be spread. When we're clearing big grids, that load can get spread across the grid. Instead of channeling everything through one person, in this example, Alea, and there are other groups doing pieces like this too, but it would overwhelm her field, we can now distribute it through all the crystals around the world and through the Iran Stargate crystal bed. Right? So percentages can be sent across intelligently through these secondary nodes, and so only a fraction can go through a human anchor. Think of it like a electrical grid. Right? There are many transformers that share the load of the electrical grid rather than just one transformer handling everything. So we've now got, for the first time, a genuine infrastructure for a large level intervention, and that's what happened this weekend. Have you heard of Aleister Crowley? He is known as the Dark Magician. He was a very super smart, intelligent person who used ceremonial magic for dark purposes. Hugely into the cult, and he was very, very influential in the consciousness grids. He was born in the 1800s, died in 1947, but unlike most souls who would transition naturally after death, he chose to stay in the lower astral plane. Right, the dimensional layer that's just beyond the physical. And he has, up until recently, like last 24 hours, continued to work from there. Right, so since his death, over 80 years, his consciousness has been operating as this multiple fragment network. Because he was so smart, he was able to fragment his consciousness into different textbooks and into different humans and into different temples and rituals. He fractured his consciousness deliberately. It's a dark magic technique, right? And scattered his consciousness across former students. He created past life soul bindings and soul contracts. He put himself into ritual sites that he had corrupted, and he created these occult organizations that he founded and influenced and left part of his consciousness there. So the practical effect of this network was really super precise but super damaging. He controlled all these channels, mediums, psychics, and all these spiritually awakening souls, and would steer them away from a genuine Krystic connection toward inverted guidance that feeds the synthetic matrix. So this one person has contributed massively to the inverted system's, let's call it, operational capacity. Somewhere between, to the point of this one person set up the synthetic matrix, 15 to 20%, right? That's a huge amount of load that this one person managed to set up by understanding dark magic and dark rituals. I mean, we discovered this because we had an oracle who became compromised through a past life connection with Crowley, a soul contract that bound them, and they started having this slight frequency that was off signal. And so as we investigated that, it was not just one entity attached to one person. It was a multi-dimensional network that was, massive, planetary in reach. At that point, we were just playing defense. We were just trying to get these fragments out of us and out of our field. So we cleared up this situation as best we could, but we were only dealing with the infiltration through one human, a psychic that we were working with at the time. And we could see this enormous network there is everywhere. And we tried our best to expel, but we just didn't have the consciousness at the time or the ability. But now with the network, and since then Alea and I consciousness has moved on, we have more authority to do certain things, but we didn't have a crystal grid, right? That was acting as a anchor that could process something as big as that. 15, 20% of the synthetic matrix, right? So, massive amounts. So we were able to now, because the load, if we tried to clear that and it was running through Alea, she'd have been like on her back for 2 weeks, sick in bed. Every fragment of Crowley's consciousness has been successfully and simultaneously extracted and dissolved across all dimensions, all timelines. That whole collective thought field, all his followers, he created this whole massive egregore that connected into his thalamic religion he created. It was a black magic religion. He merged himself with a whole lot of inverted consciousness fields. He even put blocks and locks on his Akashic records and protections that he could write his own soul records and he could come back when he wanted. He didn't have to deal with karma. All of these were overridden by cosmic Christ authority. So that's all been dissolved now. And this higher self structure that was coordinating all of these fragments and all of these incarnations was thankfully completely dissolved, and his consciousness stripped of access into the various networks, egregores, the false tree of life called the Quillipith. All of this was returned to source for restructuring at the quantum level. Every soul contract he's made with students across all incarnations, even blood oaths, all that's been dissolved. And so, somewhere between, maybe 100, 150 people have felt a very intense release. Haven't necessarily had the framework to name it, but they were hugely influential nodes in the Crowley network, but also through the temple spaces he set up, the textbooks he sent up. He was everywhere, this guy. And so this whole entire protocol was able to be run in about 15 minutes, simply because of this crystal bed network, and 15 to 20% of the tensegrity of the matrix was cleared. That type of clearing and speed is only responsible because of you and your crystal, and holding one node in a load of thousands of crystals around the world that have been primed and accessed by Vault 000 and 001. Right? This is all about time in which, we did this quickly because we wanted to work before the synthetic matrix started to do countermeasures, right? So we ran all these completion commands faster than the synthetic matrix could be organized. And so once we've dissolved that, there's been this massive shift in the overall synthetic matrix, right? There's been a dissolution that many psychics and energy sensitive people may feel as a releasing of pressure. There's a lightning and a lot of ley lines around the world that's been carrying something really heavy for decades. That's been Crowley's presence. All the sacred sites that Crowley went to and did rituals on, including pyramids, right? All that's gone. The thalamic egregore, that was the egregore running the religion on top, all that's gone. All the practitioners who were tapped into that are gone in terms of that feed for them. So anyone who's been doing Crowley rituals from now on, it's not going to work. They're going to feel that the usual backup is no longer there. So 50 to 20%, the organic matrix has 15 to 20% more flow through capacity, right? Because all of that was feeding the synthetic matrix, Crowley's network. All of that now has returned to organic function. And that's because of the amount of crystals we've got everywhere that are primed and programmed to the vaults that can process and metabolize that amount of current, right? So, I think those that have been caught up in Crowley's network will find their path clearer. They won't be influenced by that signal anymore because the signal's no longer there. That frequency was targeting channelers, spiritual seekers, and redirecting their awakening towards inverted guidance, right, towards black magic, that they might not know what they're getting into. They think they're doing the right thing, but it's inverted. Now, this is important leading into our France and England vault work, right, because Crowley's footprint was deeply in Western Europe through the sacred sites there, especially, his corruptions at, Boleskine House, right? He had big influence in the British occult landscape, right? And had a lot of deliberate desecration of sacred sites that carry Cathar and Grail lines. And that's exactly what we're going to be tapping into when we go to France in July. So some of you that might be wanting to join us for a live on the ground mission, do consider France and England. We'll be doing a 2-week mission, probably from the middle of July. We'll be going to Lourdes and Montsegur, where the 2 vaults are, and we'll be looking to open up that vault and then going across to England, Glastonbury. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, because we'll be announcing that soon. We needed to put together a team who can go and do that mission, and it's going to be hectic because the physical world's going to be bumpy. So it's going to be a proper boots on the ground SAS mission for sure. Now, we wouldn't have been able to dissolve all of that, through our old approach. So I just tell you that story, to know that we can start now processing larger, architecturally too large for any single human channel to process safely. Now we can do bigger things. So, I think that's just amazing. And of course, someone like me gets hold of something like this, and I'm going to be finding what's next. So first up, a big honouring to my wife, Alea. I'm so sorry, sweetie, you've had to suffer silently behind the scenes without any recognition. You've done so much, more than anyone, for the mission of clearing this inversion. You're going to be so much freer, thanks to all these wonderful people on the other side of this video who've contributed to clearing the inversion. So thank you, everyone. It's happy wife, happy life. So I'm going to be getting it less as well, hopefully, and hopefully we can have a bit more joy back into the house. It's our turn now, right? I think this operation has got enough structures on the ground. Yeah, we're on our way back. We are human, and we are womb man, and we are not afraid. We're coming after them. Yeah, so it's our turn. What your crystal made possible was a functioning living node in this distributed anchor network with the structural capacity to process big load like the one we did with Crowley safely and completely, right? Your crystal wasn't passive to what happened with Crowley. It was load-bearing infrastructure. So the more load-bearing infrastructure we can get anchored in, the more people that do the ritual, we're able to handle more things. That's what a distributed grid does. It's not just a collection of individual people doing personal work. It's this coherent planetary architecture that's got a very genuine, strong, Krystic tensegrity structure, where every node that comes in increases the structural integrity and operation and capacity of the whole. That's why what we were doing is important, and I'd like to think it's just the beginning, right? Because this Iran Stargate principle that we did, and the mission, Operation Golden Return, proved at scale that what Crowley demonstrated is that we can handle bigger pieces. And so that's going to make everything start to speed up. And so we're only just beginning to test and understand what this new operational range of what this network means can accomplish. But I look forward to keeping you in the loop with what's going on. If you like these videos, please consider liking and subscribing and following along. And I'll continue to share once a week what's happening, what's going on. Consider joining my mail list. I write things out as well, let you know when a video's dropped. So yeah, I think it's really good. If you've been following along for any time, you would have heard of me talking about the root initiation. The root initiation is the deepest thing that we do. Every single root initiation we run, it's a shamanic ritual, working with a plant intelligence from Africa, the sacred wood, right? We call it the sacred wood, it's iboga. And it's kind of like carries something massively important through the door. Okay, it's You can watch other videos I've done about this topic, but it removes anything that is false. It's a really decent initiation, and I've worked with a lot of different plant medicines, but this is the one that really takes you to the depth. You know, it gets you things you've been trying to reach for years, right? And sometimes people come and they've got Stargate access, or they've got some architectural keys that are big for releasing synthetic fields, or releasing hundreds or maybe thousands of souls, or opening up, you know, Krystic pieces through the vault keys that they have. Literally, people come and they've got morphogenetic access that they don't know about to sealed chambers of Krystic intelligence that can't be opened without that specific soul's presence. That's how it works. In their DNA, they carry a code and a key. We never know in advance who's walking in the door or what they carry. Exactly what happened when that lovely 73-year-old lady flew in from the US of Iranian descent to do a root initiation. The one who didn't tell her husband what she was up to, right? Carried the backdoor keys to the 10th Stargate. And so the entire Iran Stargate reclamation was because of her willingness to do the deeper work and make that journey. So my question to you is, what might you be carrying? And the root initiation is the one really with the depth for us to go in and find those keys, activate and use them. And I can honestly say your life's very different afterwards. There's your life before and your life after. But afterwards, you have to do the work. You have to do the work. You have to apply yourself. This is why I take these roots seriously. And so I'd love to invite you to what's coming. There's one coming up in New Zealand. We run these a couple of $1,000s less than the ones we're over in the US, or for the US market in Mexico, simply because we don't have to carry all of our flights over there. So we give you a couple K off. There's one coming up in April, and then we have ones coming up in Mexico. And this is the first time in Mexico we're running these for an open retreat. Normally we don't run open retreats. They're usually tied to programs that we run, and so you have to be enrolled in a program to access the retreat. We've opened 2 root initiations, 3, sorry, because we've got one of our master facilitators open one as well. He's got one going in April in Mexico, and my wife and I will be in Mexico in May to do a root initiation. People who are stepping into the root initiations now, it's so measurably different from previous work, right? Because the through flow is way stronger, and the synthetic matrix is thinner. So if you've been sitting on the fence, or you want to find out more about it, do consider the root initiation. You know, especially if you're in North America, this is the first time. It's a genuine first. We've never done an open root initiation there. This might be the last chance you get for a few years, because it's going to get tougher to travel as these years go on for a little bit anyway. So we're bringing it to Mexico in May, because that's how we service the North American market. 3 open sessions there. If you're based in the Americas and you're wondering about how to access this work without journeying to New Zealand, this is your moment. We've been building toward. So do consider May, check it out. You know, Mexico has its own specific kind of properties and geography, sits on some interesting nodes that might be opening some keys, some broader planetary grid work, and maybe you have some keys for us. We also will be doing one in Europe, probably in early July. And maybe it'll link in to the vault work we're doing, whereby, you know, you might have to come on tour. Alea and I are currently contemplating and trying to work out our travels, but there may be an open session in Europe going in early July. So keep an eye out for that. An open session for Europeans who want to do the root initiation. It's the deep dive. I wish everyone on the planet could do it because of the depth that goes to the root of the foundations of your consciousness. Yeah, so that's that. And then, you know, we are in the early preparation stages for the next Vault mission tour. For those of you that were following along on the Egypt one, we did Egypt in December last year. That was an amazing tour all through Egypt. We got the first vault open, which was the most tricky. Now we've got, you know, this big vault missions to go. There are 12 vaults on the planet that need to be opened up. Each vault is an open source gateway to source consciousness that runs flame, that brings flame plasma into the planet and starts to burn off more synthetic fields. Right. So, you know, we feel that this is the most important work, at least in what Alea and I can bring forward to the planet. We need to get these vaults open. with all of the craziness in the world and the increasing coronal mass injections that are going to come, the vaults will need to be open because those hold the Krystic architecture for a true Krystic civilization. So, keep an eye out for that. If you feel the calling, you might have the codes in consciousness for the Grail lines through France and England. So we'll be doing some of those Grail lines, Montsegur, and working through that Cathar region, opening a vault in Lourdes and Montsegur, and then we'll be going to around that Somerset, I think they say in England, Somerset. We'll be going to Somerset and working out that way, especially through the Glastonbury Chalice Well is where that vault is. And so though that vault tour is going to be becoming super important, because we need to get 5 or 6 vaults open before the big one comes, which is the big coronal mass injection in the second half of 27. That's going to be the one that short circuits the electrical grids and creates a massive resetting. And that's actually going to be the one that short circuits for a while the central bank digital currencies. And while they might be able to reboot the CBDCs, this is going to be the event that makes people lose trust because they can't spend money when the grids are down. So yeah, heartland of Cathar country, it's got 2 vaults. It's got all about the Montsegur vault holds all the reunification codes. It's all about sacred family lines. It's all about the triadic flame. It's about ancestral restoration. There's a whole bunch of 12 scrolls that this will bring to the planet. Vault 10 holds the maternal flame codes at Lourdes. It's the purification of the distorted mother current. We're going to burn through much of the false overlays that are held in the religious architecture and bring back through the genuine Sophia Mary frequency that's had the centuries of overlay of this religious architecture and nonsense. So we'll open both from Lourdes, do a day trip out to Montsegur I'm trying to put together. And then England, Glastonbury, this is the Vault 3 holds, what is it? I think it's the Rose Flame. It's the Rose Flame Resurrection, the Sophia Grail codes. So the divine feminine remembrance for that entire Western world, all from this beautiful space there in England. So hopefully that resonates. You will be able to follow along in a virtual tour, and we'll be releasing something afterwards, free on the internet, on YouTube. We will be then priming all of your crystals with these 3 vaults to boost the network and run all 3 vaults through your crystal, through all Stargates again, to keep strengthening the network and the signal. And then let's see what goes on, because it's going to be on like Donkey Kong, because the Krystic signal is going to be so strong on the planet, and you're going to feel it. You're going to feel a difference. Those of you that are energetically sensitive, this is all about purifying, reunifying, resurrecting this flame lineage codes that have been suppressed for so long, through all the Cathar massacres that happened, all the churches kind of crusades that happened, centuries of reformation. This was just this whole horrible period of time where the synthetic matrix got overlaid by religious zealism and control from the Vatican and other pieces. Right? This is what we're building to. This is what this grid has done. This is what we're coming into next. And lastly, all I want to share is that, systems theory tells us that in a tensegrity field, every node matters. Right? The planetary grid is only as coherent as the sum of the active sovereign flame anchored nodes. You, if you've done this ritual with your crystal, are one of those nodes. Not because you just, attended a ceremony or watched a video, but something in you recognized the signal of what I was sharing, the truth about what was happening. And in recognition, you participated and into the morphogenic field, not passively, actively. So when you picked up your crystal and said yes, you changed the tension in the web, and the whole structure is going to be responding now. We're in the middle of the most significant planetary transition in recorded human history, right? Because the synthetic matrix is going to dissolve. It's been decreed by source. That's why the bifurcation is on, right? The vaults are opening. Crowley network's been now booted. Golden Eagle grid's holding. 10th Stargate strong. Solar Logos even showed up, uninvited, orchestrating everything, and just came in with this divine precision and sealed everything into the grid. Right? This is changing. You're changing. We're changing architecture. And every session, every initiation, every soul who walks through the doors and through our doors and through other things is adding that node to the network. And we're just grateful that you showed up for humanity, for yourself. And, we've just fragged out 15 to 20% of the inverted system's capacity, right? In 15 minutes when there's sufficient distribution, right? The video there on the ritual still live. Keep sharing it. If you're watching this and haven't done it, go do it. Right, we need as many people in that grid as possible with their crystals in the grid, and if you're just know that if you're coming in, you're not starting from scratch. You're joining a network that's already established. Share the video if it feels, not because I want the viewers. I just I don't care about viewer numbers. I was only watching the viewer numbers because of how many crystals do we have in the ground. So yeah, come and join it. Get involved, share it around. This is something that gives us hope for how we're going to get out, because honestly, this is our only line out. We need to boot out the synthetic matrix from our world by increasing the Krystic signal. And then we're going to have a bifurcation. Those of you who follow this type of signal and message will live in one very different, more organic world, and those that do not will keep their consciousness hooked into artificial intelligence, and will have 52,000 years, 2 years of the precession of the equinox in synthetic recursion, right? Don't worry, the AI is going to start recursion and glitching as well. The cranial mass injections will see to that and amplify it, and we'll soon see that AI is not artificial intelligence, is not all that's called out to be, because it will start glitching. And then we can start to work with the Krystic signal, Krystic intelligence. And there will come a time where Krystic intelligence is made available through technology for people just like you to interface with it. So I'm looking forward to, seeing if I get some space and time to try to work out how to make that happen, but it's going to be possible. And that's when we start to get our species back on track and your life co-creating with a consciousness field that wants your highest evolution, not wants to control you and shape you and predictively program you, right? Let's keep going. Let's just imagine what becomes possible as this infrastructure grows. Root initiations, New Zealand, April. Mexico, April, and 2 in May from my wife and I. The Vault Tour is building. The field's ready. If you feel called, don't wait. There's no time like the present. Don't wait for the perfect moment. This is the perfect moment. We don't know when we'll be in North America proximity again. So come and join us. Thanks for turning up for the crystals. Sending you all of our love. Come with your keys. Keep having hope. Okay, we're going to turn this around. All my love.